Hey, we're doing stand-up shows October 20th through the 23rd in Florida and Buffalo. Go to jimmydorecomedy.com for a link for tickets. I want to cover this story. It's very important. We've covered it before, and it's about unbelievable corporate overreach and power in our judicial system to punish whistleblowers and people doing the right thing. Here it is in Salon. It says, corporate state came for human rights lawyer Steven Donziger, and we're next. And Judge Loretta Preska, an advisor to the Conservative Federalist Society, to which Chevron is a major donor, sentenced human rights attorney Steven Donziger to 6 months in prison Friday for misdemeanor contempt of court after he had already spent 787 days under arrest. Donziger has been fighting against polluting American oil companies for nearly 3 decades on behalf of the indigenous communities and peasant farmers in Ecuador. His only crime was winning a $9.5 billion judgment in 2011 against Chevron for thousands of plaintiffs. The lawsuit against Chevron alleged it deliberately discharged 16 billion gallons of toxic waste from its oil sites into rivers, groundwater, and farmland. This is Chris Hedges writing in SharePost. Since the verdict, Chevron has come after him, weaponizing litigation to destroy him economically, professionally, and personally. Here's a breaking. Judge Kaplan, the U.S. judge who charged me, ordered Amazon villagers to pay Chevron $395,000 for legal fees the day after I was sentenced. In Kaplan's world, indigenous people now must pay Chevron's absurd fees after beating the company in court. The Donziger case is an ominous warning that the American legal system is broken. Ralph Nader called the nation's attorneys and judges lucrative cogs in a corporate wheel. He notes that law school curriculums are built around corporate law and corporate power and corporate perpetration and corporate defense. The persecution of Donziger fits a pattern familiar to millions of poor Americans who are coerced into accepting plea deals, many for crimes they did not commit, and sent to prison for decades. It fits the pattern of the judicial lynching and prolonged psychological torture of Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning. It fits the pattern of those denied habeas corpus and due process at Guantanamo Bay or in CIA black sites. It fits the pattern of those charged under terrorism laws, many held at the Federal Metropolitan Correctional Center in Lower Manhattan, who cannot see the evidence used to indict them. If they can do this legally to the demonized, they can, and one day they will do it to the rest of us. So let me bring in our special guest today, a human rights lawyer who helped to win a $9.5 billion settlement for Chevron for the people of Ecuador. He is the subject of the most outrageous corporate persecution campaign in modern history. Please welcome Steven Donziger. Steve, thank you for coming on. So, Steven, we're here with Steven. So, Steven, please remind people of the misdemeanor that you are charged with that is the supposed basis for all of this case against you.
Sure, Jimmy, thank you for having me. I was charged with what's called criminal contempt of court, charged not by a prosecutor, but by a judge, Judge Kaplan, who claimed that I engaged in a crime by appealing one of his orders that I turn over my computer and cell phone to Chevron, which would have violated all sorts of ethical obligations I have to my clients to protect attorney-client privilege information. So I never said I wouldn't turn it over. I comply with all court orders as a lawyer. What I did do is I appealed it. And while his order, which I'd never seen an order like this before, while it was on appeal, he charged me with criminal contempt of court for appealing his own order. I believe it's baseless. Ultimately, it was not a crime. At worst, we had a civil discovery conflict. But on the basis of that, he's had me locked up now in my home for over 2 years and now facing a 6-month prison sentence. I never had a jury trial. The U.S. government, through the federal prosecutor here in New York, declined the case. They refused to prosecute Judge Kaplan's charges. So Judge Kaplan, rather than stop there, he appointed a private corporate law firm to prosecute me. And it turns out this law firm called Seward & Kissel has Chevron as a client. So I'm essentially being criminally prosecuted by a private corporation in this case Chevron, the same corporation that I beat in court down in Ecuador to the tune of a more or less a $10 billion judgment, won by indigenous peoples and farmer communities over massive oil pollution. So this is a new frontier, I believe, in the United States in terms of persecution by corporations against human rights lawyers and against people who call them out.
Is this the same judge that sentenced Jeremy Hammond for the longest sentence for hacking for exposing Dow Chemicals crimes to WikiLeaks?
The judge who just sentenced me to the maximum term of 6 months for my Class B misdemeanor, the most petty crime imaginable or possible in the federal system, is the same judge who sentenced Hammond, yes.
Wow. Okay, so this is a real winner. So, you know, this is just so stunning and jaw-dropping that this kind of thing, that the government wouldn't, the government prosecutors wouldn't prosecute, that the judge is allowed to appoint a private law firm to prosecute you, is just mind-blowing. And then and talk about a conflict of interest. It's a law firm that represents the people. It's just crazy. So people, who is supposed to get it? Who should people be complaining to about this?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, the two judges involved, they have lifetime appointments. It's so hard to hold these judges accountable. But ultimately, what I'm asking is that the Department of Justice take back the private prosecution and prosecute me directly. I want a professional prosecutor, someone who is required by law to adhere to certain ethical standards established by the Department of Justice, first among them to be neutral, to not have a financial interest in a case. So, I'm probably the only lawyer in U.S. history who's essentially begging the DOJ to prosecute him or her. But I believe if they take it over, the case will be quickly dismissed because there's no basis for the charges. In fact, the DOJ already declined to prosecute me. But, Merrick Garland, who's our Attorney General, Joe Biden, we can't allow private corporate prosecutions in the United States, or for that matter, any rule of law country. So, I hold them directly responsible. I think they need to do something here. And we're asking people to call Merrick Garland and demand he take over this prosecution. And also call your congresspersons and demand that the prosecution be taken over by the DOJ and that I be released.
And so so I'm going to guess, because I know that Joe Biden has been taking corporate money his whole life and done the bidding of corporations against the people. They're not sympathetic to your case at the Department of Justice right now under Merrick Garland, are they?
We haven't heard boo from them. We've been trying to reach out to them for weeks. My lawyers wrote a really incredible 20-page letter explaining why this is a violation of the law. We got a 2-line email back saying they weren't going to do anything. And, several congresspersons, including AOC and Jim McGovern, Jamie Raskin, Cori Bush among them, sent a letter to Garland last April, and they never got a response, demanding, of course, that he review the case. So, and then 2 Senators Markey and Whitehouse, sent a letter asking for an investigation into this bizarre private prosecution, and they've gotten, as far as I know, no response. So there seems to be a lack of will on the part of the Biden administration to really deal with this and investigate or take back the case. And I just don't think it's a good look. Not only is this causing me tremendous harm, me and my family, it's an ordeal, and it's tough as hell to put up with this, but I think it's embarrassing for our country. The Biden administration is allowing a human rights lawyer, a respected human rights lawyer, a successful lawyer. We won the case down in Ecuador. It's been affirmed by 6 appellate courts and 28 different appellate judges, have validated our victory. And Biden and Garland sit there and let a human rights lawyer in America be locked up in his own home for over 2 years by a judge whose charges were rejected by the regular federal prosecutor and who appointed a Chevron law firm to prosecute me. It's just extraordinary.
This seems like the kind of case that 60 Minutes would love to cover. Have anybody in that kind of platform covered you, or is it just people like me?
It's mostly independent journalists. I mean, the so-called big media outlets, including the New York Times and all the networks, have totally ignored this story, unfortunately.
The New York Times has ignored it. Wow, there's a shocker. So people don't understand how intertwined big business is with government and the media, right? So the media is supposed to be the watchdogs and making sure corporations don't steal from us and screw us. But what happens is the corporations, the thieves, the criminals bought the media. And so do you think that to me, that's the reason why I have a show, is because you can't get the truth from the media anymore, because where do they get their funding? They get their funding from Chevron, fossil fuels, from Wall Street, banks, the military industrial complex. They are owned and financed by the people they're supposed to be investigating and exposing, which is why you're not going to hear about Steven's case, which is unbelievable. I mean, imagine if this was happening under Trump and people would be like, oh my God, Trump, but it was happening, as people still aren't saying. So this is bipartisan. This is the corporate capture of our government, and nobody's going to do anything about it unless we scream about it. So now what's going to happen? What happens now?
Well, it's a little unclear. I mean, she sentenced me to 6 months in prison. What she's trying to do now, Judge Preska, who's a leader of the Federalist Society, to which Chevron is a major donor. This is the judge who had me locked up and who tried me without a jury in what we thought was a charade of a trial. But in any event, she sentenced me to the maximum sentence. By the way, Jimmy, the longest sentence ever imposed for my so-called offense is 90 days of home confinement. And I've already been in over 800 days. And on top of that, she's trying to send me into prison for 6 months. We've appealed her order that I report immediately to prison while my appeal of her case is pending. She's trying to get me to serve my sentence before the appellate court can rule, and I think there's a moderately good chance I'm going to be fully exonerated. So the idea that I would serve my whole sentence before the appellate court can rule, again, is just another example of the abuse of power that I believe she's engaging in. So the question right now that has to be decided by the appellate court, it should be decided within a few weeks, is whether I can stay out pending the resolution of my appeal or whether I have to serve the entirety of my sentence before the appellate court can rule. That might come as a shock, by the way, to people. Like, someone has a great appeal, but they still have to serve their sentence before the appeal can be heard on a misdemeanor. You know, it's unheard of in our system to force someone to serve his or her prison sentence on a misdemeanor before their appeal can be heard. I'm the first such case.
And can you explain to people again why you didn't have a jury trial? Because this is mind-blowing.
Well, there's a little exception to the rule about jury trials. So first of all, the U.S. Constitution grants the right to a jury trial for anyone accused of a crime. But what judges have done over the years is they've carved out an important exception, which is this: if the judge agrees in advance to limit the sentence to 6 months or less, then the judge can deny a jury and try the case himself or herself, which is what happened in my case. It was just a maneuver to prevent a neutral fact finder from looking at my case. I believe they would have acquitted me, but they know this. I mean, this is not about justice, truth, evidence. It's about prosecuting and criminalizing a successful human rights lawyer, a corporation and its judicial allies doing that. So, you know, they're not interested in a jury. They're not interested in due process. They're interested in trying to maneuver and manipulate the system to cause me maximum harm. And that's what they've done. Again, it's unfair. We have an appeal. But, you know, this is a playbook, Jimmy. I mean, I think Chevron and the other big fossil fuel majors are going to use this playbook if they can get away with it with me. They're going to use it against other activists.
Yes, exactly. Of course they will. Of course they are. I had no idea that we didn't really have a right to a jury trial in America. I had no idea that you could be criminally prosecuted without a jury and all the
There are hundreds of thousands of trials every year in this country with no criminal trials with no jury. It's really an outrage in my view, but it happens all the time.
Well, here we are. Again, we're going to keep following your case, and stay in touch, and we'll give you as much publicity as we can. Whatever we can do at our little show here, we'll do.
Sure,
for you.
Jimmy, and thank you so much for allowing me to share my story with you. I really, really appreciate it. By the way, if people want to help, can I just mention our website real quick?
Sure.
It's freedonziger.com, one word, and it's spelled Donziger. You can go there and learn more about the case, get articles, and we also have a legal defense fund, which we raise money for to pay the expenses involved in fighting these monsters. So you can also, I invite you to, if you can, to help with that. Again, the website is freedonziger.com.
Okay, everybody check that out. Appreciate the work you're doing. Sorry this is happening to you. Stay strong, pal.
Okay, thanks, Jimmy. We'll talk soon.
Okay. We're doing stand-up comedy in Florida, in West Palm Beach, and Dania, and then we're going to Buffalo, Baltimore, Tempe, and Portland. Go to jimmydorcomedy.com for a link for all our tickets.